I want to take a minute to thank everybody for coming out to the channel and for supporting the channel. And for those of you who have found that new thanks button on YouTube and have smashed that to donate to the channel, special shout out. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. One of the strengths of Chinese medicine is its ability to change your behaviors and your perceptions of the world. And so not just your symptoms of physical pain, but actually how you see the world. And in classical Chinese medicine, that was where the focus was. It wasn't on, healing your back pain, because the focus was on what they called internal alchemy. And internal alchemy was about changing your perceptions, your behaviors to help you attain the way, right? To help you attain Tao. And there's 3 philosophical pillars in Chinese medicine: Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, with Taoism being the oldest. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you how Taoism explains how Chinese medicine works. And, at the end of this episode, I bet you're going to say to yourself, well, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to use a couple examples to help you see what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to show you how Taoism and Chinese medicine helps you find a solution for you. So you ready? Let's get started. One of the analogies I'm going to use is the analogy of roadways, because we drive every day and we get so used to driving. We drive so much that we could, if we accidentally forget to think about where we're going, we'll just get on the road. We'll go to where we've driven all the time. And even if that's not where we meant to go, we are so good at driving these same roads over and over again that we can drive them pretty much in our sleep. And that's the concept of pathways in the brain. The brain, it's this huge thing that sits on top of our head that has millions and millions of synapses. It's this enormous computer. And the recent research shows that it's active all the time, but not all of the brain is active. And when I talk about that, I mean, there's one part of the brain that is active when we're talking. And then when we're thinking about words, it's active in a different way. What's tough is we like to think that things are like a car, right? The body and our brain is like a car, that we can pull it apart and that we can put it all back together the exact same way, and it's always going to do the exact same thing. So, like a carburetor is always going to be a carburetor. A gas tank is always going to be a gas tank. Your fuel gauge is always going to be a fuel gauge. So the fuel gauge, it's not going to be measuring the outside temperature. It's always going to be measuring what the fuel is. And we want to think that the body is like that the body is going to just do one thing, that these peptides or these neurons, they just do this one thing all the time, over and over and over again. But that's not the truth of it, is it? Nope. It seems that the same thing in the body can do 2 different things, if not more. So why I bring that up is when we start out as a child, our brain starts out with this blank slate of what life is. And then we start interacting with our family and we start learning how to express ourselves in ways that our family can understand and we get our needs met, right? So we're going to keep on changing how we express ourselves. We're going to keep on changing our behaviors until we figure out a way for our parents, our siblings to understand what we're asking for. So when we're hungry, we might start out with, hungry, I'm really hungry. And nobody's responding. I'm getting hungrier. Hungry. Really hungry, and still nothing's happening. And then it gets to the, crying match. I am so hungry. And that's when your parents really are like, we got to figure out what this child wants, because this crying is not working for me. So when we start out life, we start out with a blank slate, and then we try out things as we interact with the world to get our needs and our wants met. And when we figure out what gets our needs and our wants met, then we've created a pathway, and we're going to use that pathway over and over and over again. Now, that pathway, that same method of creating needs and wants is created for not just needs and wants, but it's created for avoidance, right? To protect ourselves. So if we experience trauma locks in an emotion immediately, and we immediately pick up new behaviors, and we cruise down a different path. Now, if that trauma happens again and again and again, that pathway to avoid it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So we are creating these pathways, these roads in our brain on our responses to everything that goes on in the world. It's amazing that we can keep that much information in the brain, or maybe it's not really that much information. Maybe in total, we really only have a few different pathways that we take to everything that happens in the world, in our world. Either way, these pathways that we've created have now formed our perception of the world. So that baby who wants food, he's going to run down that pathway of crying to make sure that he gets fed right away. Fear of abandonment, crying, fed right away. So, that's what I'm thinking, is that there might only be a couple roadways, and we use those in different situations. Who knows? I'm sure we'll figure it out sometime. But let's go back to how Taoism sees how Chinese medicine works. So we have these pathways that we've created, and we run on these pathways every day, and that's our whole perception of the world. How we see the world is in these roads that we take. Now, you know what? There was this guy had a fear of speaking in front of people, and this fear, it was almost incapacitating for him. Now, nice guy, big bear of a fellow. Everybody loves him, because you just like those kind of guys, right? And for most of us, that wouldn't have been a huge problem, because, when are we going to get up and speak in front of a huge audience? Not too soon. But for this person, this teddy bear of a person, he was a salesperson. So he had to do it all the time. And before every speech, before every time he had to get up and talk in front of his clients, he would start sweating, and his chest would tighten up, and he'd start to feel like he was hyperventilating. So here was the problem. So here he's having all these emotional reactions to speaking. The problem is, this is how he supported his family. And being that it was such a problem for him, he was sure that he was a fake, that he really couldn't speak in front of people. I mean, he wasn't having a problem with sales, but he was sure that he was a fake because he had such a big problem speaking in front of people. And he was sure that he was going to get fired because of this. Isn't that how our brain works for us? Well, this had become such a problem. He started to see a counselor. And here's the thing. This had become a problem, and you end up starting into self-talk. And there's not many of us that talk to ourselves like we talk to someone we love. How people talk to themselves, they do self-talk like, why can't you do this? Something as simple as this. Everyone else can do it. You are so stupid. I can't believe you can't do this. Stop being such a baby. That's kind of how we talk to ourselves. And here's the thing. How you talk to yourself creates your reality. So even if it isn't true, your reality is based on your perception and what you're creating for yourself. And that's the road you jump on each time you get into a similar situation. So you know how we were talking about, we make these paths on how we react to certain things, and it's like this road, and we jump into our car and we drive down that path every time. That's what's happening here, is you make this road that you jump on every time you get into this similar situation. The minute this guy heard that he had to go do a speech, he'd start sweating, start hyperventilating, because that was the road that he jumped on every time this came up. Well, okay. And then it would go into the self-criticism, and the self-criticism started taking away from his self-esteem. And when he started taking away from his self-esteem, guess what? That's when he jumped on this road in pure panic, and he's frantically driving down this road, hyperventilating, sweating, and then all of a sudden he accidentally crashes into something. What would that be? Well, what if this is causing so much stress in his head? He's taken away so much of his self-esteem that he accidentally gets into a fight with his wife over nothing. Or he stops participating with his children because he doesn't feel like he's a good father. Or another fear, what about he says something at work? There's all sorts of things that start to happen in people's heads as they go down pathways, and these pathways start getting out of control. Each time you jump on that road, you start feeling more frantic. And that's why he went to the counselor, is hoping to figure out how to travel that pathway without being so frantic, taking away some of the energy behind that expression, so that he didn't accidentally blow up at work, or he didn't accidentally blow up at home, or he stopped experiencing all this anxiety. Okay. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, where there was something that you were really afraid to do, and it just created so much anxiety for you? That's kind of where we're at. Those roadways that you created in your childhood, when there were no roads and life was yet to be defined, those roadways that you created back then, they're really well used, and they're familiar because of all the time you've spent with them. So these roadways, they've created your perception of the world. And if you dealt with trauma, you know that pathway. It comes with a distrust of situations which have any similarity to the original trauma. So here's one that most of us have experienced. Think about being in a car accident. Afterwards, there's always this nagging discomfort whenever a similar situation presents itself. And sometimes it's even more than a nagging discomfort. It's literally fear. So a few years ago, for me, it was early in the morning. I was waiting at a red light, and a car came up behind me, didn't use her brakes, and slammed into my vehicle. Okay, so one trauma years earlier, and I still don't use that four-way stop. I go other ways. I started going other ways, and it happened naturally without me even being aware of it. So first I started making excuses, that there was too much traffic on that road and that four-way stop, and it was easier if I just went this other route. And after a time, I had to use that other route so many different times that it became a new roadway. So here's the thing. People are not so unique when it comes to how energy is moved through the body. That was the basis of Taoism and Chinese medicine. It was understanding how the individual uses energy in the body. Everything from 5-element theory to Qi to the Tao, everything is about understanding how you use energy in the body. And by understanding that, Taoists believe they could aid the individual in repairing or correcting those paths to obtain something much more important. And that may be inner peace, it may be inner acceptance, It may be the courage to move forward, the ability to see and understand your surroundings, the opportunity to stop projecting your perception of the world on others. So it could be anything. And being that Taoism is the foundation for Chinese medicine, the tools to aid you in changing your outlook are actually in Chinese medicine. So before, like maybe 2,000 years ago, Chinese medicine was the unique ability to fire different pathways in the brain. So by truly understanding how the energy flows in the body, you could use needles, you could use herbs, you could use foods to adjust the energy flow in your body. And those adjustments would activate other parts of the brains that you hadn't been using. So you'll begin to activate these other sensors, and through repetition, you're going to keep those sensors activated until you've created a new road to travel. So remember in my car accident, instead of going to that four-way, I would take a right turn and go down a street and take another left turn. And that's how I would avoid that four-way. That is what Chinese medicine allows you to do. It allows you to test out another pathway to get to where you want to go. You do that enough, now your perception of the world has changed. So let's go back to that salesperson. So when the salesperson went to the counselor, what happened is they were talking their way through the trauma over and over and over again. And by talking their way through that trauma, they were able to visualize it from different angles. They could feel the different sensations, hyperventilating, the sweating, and they could hear the different things that went on, like people in the other room rustling their papers or his breath as he hyperventilated. So think about that for a minute. Where else do you train yourself like that? Well, if you're an athlete, right? If you are training to be the best athlete in your sport, what is one of the ways you go about training? Well, you go about training to do this by thinking about it every day, by visualizing how your body position and how your movements are over and over and over again. And you feel the sensation as your body changes its positions. You hear the different noises that happen. Maybe it's the air flowing through. Maybe it's the click of the bike chain, or maybe it's the thwack of hitting the golf ball or the soccer ball. Mentally, you practice this over and over and over again to perfect it. And by doing that, you become really, really good at whatever it is you're doing. Instead of changing your perception, they're reinforcing the roadway. So that's one of the things that you'll see in Taoism is they don't think it's super helpful to talk over and over and over about a trauma because they think it locks it in your body. Now, and this is why they think it locks into your body. Now, there are times when reinforcing the roadway is pretty important, right? So when trauma that's been denied, you might need to reinforce that roadway so that you can at least see it. But in Taoism, overall, they would prefer that you change the roads that you're traveling. And because Taoism focuses solely on energy, what they do is they have all these models and theories of how energy flows through the body. And what they do with needles, with herbs, and with food is they show you how to use these tools to allow you to take a different path, or to allow you to open a different doorway, or allow you to take a different road. And as you take that road over and over and over again, you begin to train yourself to new perception. Does that make sense? For me, when I first went through this and I looked at it, and because I had always heard that, Yeah, Taoism doesn't think talking through your trauma is the most effective way of healing it. I didn't know what to say because that was such a big part of Western medicine today. And then when I started going through this and how they thought about it, I really started to understand that you are really locking that trauma in. And what they would prefer that you did is understand what energy is being blocked, understanding what roadways you're using, what energetic roadways you're using, and use Chinese medicine, which is either needles, herbs, or food, to allow you to transition to another roadway and then use that roadway over and over and over again until it becomes your new routine. And now you're seeing life differently. I don't know which one's the right answer. I just know that through Chinese medicine, I was able to lay down quite a few things, and my clients are able to lay down quite a few things. So that is how Chinese medicine and acupuncture works, or that's at least one of the thoughts in Taoism on how it works. So I hope that helps you out, you guys. And until next time, I will catch you on the other side. I bet you're wondering, what happened to the salesperson? You're not going to end this episode and not tell me what happened to the salesperson, are you? No, I'm not. I was, and then all of a sudden I remembered that I had to tell you the end of the story. Well, it took about they did use Chinese medicine. They did do acupuncture and herbs. And in about 6 weeks, they were able to stop going to counseling because things started changing in their life, how they were viewing the situation, how they were interacting with people, how they were interacting with their own self-talk. And it took about 3 months, and they had stopped catastrophizing the whole situation. They had stopped sweating profusely when they had to get up to speak. They had stopped hyperventilating. And now he was like everybody else. And his relationships at home had gone back to where they used to be. Awesome. Okay, so there you have it, you guys. Until next time, I'll catch you on the other side.